hear me okay?
If I understood you correctly, you predicted this conflict in Libya going on 11 years beyond where you've predicted the U.S. empire ending. And I'm interested in your view of the U.S. role in the coming months and years. And I'm even more curious, if you have time and willingness, in any of your thoughts on Afghanistan and what is likely to happen there.
I see Obama's move as a very clever move towards the end of the U.S. empire. What Obama is saying is, okay, we did the opening job, we now leave it to NATO. Of course, the US is still the head of NATO. But it is a clever move. In my own book, The End of the US Empire, I say that the possible successor to the US empire is Western Europe. I don't believe in China. When I aim in China, I very quickly hear we are not that stupid. And I could add it takes a certain Western stupidity to do that kind of thing. Namely the idea that you have the one formula for the whole world. China doesn't believe it. So, you can say, one reading of Obama's speech yesterday, which was actually intellectual at a quite high level, was to extricate himself from the tradition of incessant intervention. He said very clearly that when the safety of the US people is at risk, he will intervene. He also said that when our interests and values coincide, even if the safety is not at risk, we may intervene. But he also said, no Iraq, and he could have said no Afghanistan. His parallel was with Iraq. And then he came into the dilemma, which he didn't solve. What happens now? How far is he willing to go? We know McCain's answer to that one, and he would probably have put that into practice had he won the election. And he would have taken revenge for whatever he suffered at Vietnam Hill, Saigon Hill. No. Leaving that aside, excuse me, I mean Ho Chi Minh Hill. Leaving that aside, I do not think that the fight in Libya will be against the US. I think it will be against French, English, Italian. The Norwegian and Danes will withdraw very quickly, and that's where the battle will be. So in that way, I come to Afghanistan. The reasons why the war in Afghanistan is unwinnable are, to my mind, three. First of all, I have talked with Taliban. They say if you want to know anything in this field, you have to talk with the other side. You have to talk with Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is very difficult to talk with. In my view, it's not an organization. But there are people who sympathize. Now, point one. But Taliban stand for three things, in my experience. Dead against secularization. Dead against Kabul in favor of a decentralized country with 20,000 autonomous villages and 7-8 nations. Dead against being invaded. These seem to me to be three relatively reasonable positions. And if you take an average Afghan, you will find that there are very few who don't share any one of these views. They score 1, 2, or 3. A full-blood Talib, Taliban as you know is plural, a full-blood Talib will get +3. Yes. Now, that means the West is fighting 3 wars at the same time. Point 2. There is in Islam no such idea as capitulation in a war with infidels. In a war between two Muslim countries, the institute of capitulation applies, not with infidels. You may have a group coming out with a white flag, but there will not be general capitulation. Point 3. In Islam, the basic unit is the Ummah, U-M-M-A-H, the community of the believers, 1,560 million. When it comes to the 57 countries, they point out that almost all the borders are drawn by the West. They don't accept it. So when a Muslim comes from anywhere into Afghanistan, it's not a foreigner who has entered. It's where the Pentagon gets the whole thing so wrong. Because the US believes in the state system. Islam does not. That means that the war is potentially against 1,560 million persons. That's a lot. If you put these three factors together, the war is obviously unwinnable. So let me now turn that into something positive. What would the peace look like? I've been in and out and up and down since year 2001. And I think the peace has the following characteristics. Coalition government, a loose federation for Afghanistan, a confederation with surrounding countries, because the Tajiks in Afghanistan are also in Tajikistan, the Uzbeks in Uzbekistan, the Dari speaking in Iran, the Pashtun speaking in Pakistan. Those borders are drawn mainly by the West, including the Tsar, so let's say by the Occident and the Bolsheviks. Went forward, basic needs, primacy in politics. And that very quickly comes to education. The same for all nations in Afghanistan and both genders. And when I have had a chance, indirectly or directly, to talk with Taliban, they say, roughly speaking, yes, 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 we know we are behind. But we are not going to be told this from Americans and feminists, and particularly not from American feminists. This we want to hear from our brothers and sisters. And the most interesting countries are Tunisia, Indonesia, Turkey. And I think I know what they mean. What they mean is, what Quranic verses did you use to justify equality? Because there are Quranic verses in different directions. Now, the fifth point, it's a very violent culture, the Afghan culture. The fifth point would be peacekeeping, and that peacekeeping would have to be by Muslim countries. Probably the same. And you could imagine a neutral Afghanistan without foreign bases, in charge of whatever oil runs through its country, on an axis between Istanbul, Ankara, and Shanghai, Beijing, between China and Turkey. On that axis, there will also be Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan. They are almost, I won't say identical, not at all, but they are very, very close. I think peace is in that direction. In Washington, D.C., I've been sitting in the Sam Rayburn building with American congressmen saying exactly this. And they say, interesting, but how can we convey that to the American voter? The American voter wants to win, win, win. And I say, are you so sure? And isn't it your task as a leader to convey to the American voter other perspectives? Well, my guess is that what will happen to the US in this situation is the following. It will not win. It will not be defeated. It will not be present for being beaten, like it was in Vietnam. It will become irrelevant. You might say something worse than being defeated. If US becomes irrelevant, who become relevant? Turkey, China, to mention two countries, Iran. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Germany. The Security Council vote, I think, is appointed to the future. It was a short question and a long answer, but you got most of it.
Could you speak to the gap we have currently between economic democracy in this country, particularly as relates to the oligarchy, the banking elite, and the war profiteers? The gap that we have in economic democracy, and how, through your transcendence approach, Americans might address this global catastrophe that we have.
I was a full-time American, not a quarter-time one, or 6 or something, but very much hard in this country. I would say not through Congress, but by practicing economic democracy at the grassroots level. And that would mean siding with those who are now withdrawing their funds from Bank of America, creating savings bank, where there would be a board of savers who would be directing the bank, creating agricultural cooperatives with farmers' markets, and see to it that there is some kind of decision-making process in it. I would work on the basic needs. Food. I would see to it that water is democratized, and that education is as much as possible, and there is much of this in the US, decided over at the local level. I would do the same for health. And I would organize polyclinics, cooperative polyclinics. They would be there for doctors. They would administer generic pharmaceuticals. And they would know enough to be able to handle 90% of the ailments that people in general have. In other words, I would take it from bottom up. This is 50 years since Eisenhower declared the military-industrial complex, MIC. Country is run by that one. But I think a better formula is not MIC, but MICC, the Military Industrial Congress Complex. In other words, that Congress is in it. I would at present not waste much time in trying to elect the correct freshman or woman into Congress. I would rather work at the grassroots level, and Americans are extremely good at that. So here comes up the positive side, you know, the ability to cooperate, the ability to practice equality, the innovative ability, the universalism, the generosity. All of that points in favor of that kind of solution. I would boycott any investment bank and simply go for the savings banks, to put it that way. Now, much of this is happening in Vermont and Northern California. There are some other places. I mean, there are the old suspects from a reactionary point of view, would be Vermont and Northern California, roughly speaking. When you go towards San Diego, it becomes more and more rusty, you know, the further down you go. But, I mean, the difference is enormous, no doubt about it. But one thing that we have learned from Europe is that this big, huge cooperative complex called Mondragon in the Basque part of Spain has the enormous advantage when crisis hits that you can distribute the costs more evenly. You can simply have a General Assembly that says, okay, we cut down on the working hours because we cannot sell that much. And all of us cut down some of the salary, but we don't fire. We stand together. Now, cooperatives have been accused of being inefficient, and there is some to that. Could be competitive. So it's also a question of improving cooperatives. In short, I would stand for that one. I would stand for many cooperatives, competition among the cooperatives, not one big state-proclaimed cooperative or things of that type. So it would be neither Soviet nor the United States, but something different. The US can make this. So we are looking forward to it.
One more question.
Hi, I was fascinated, well, by the whole talk, but I was particularly fascinated by what you were talking about, the women, or women revolution, as you called it, and I was wondering to what extent do you think it will prevail in the Middle East, North Africa, and also in Israel. For example, the 2004 Arab Development Report said that, the lack of emancipation of women was one of the 3 factors that was most holding back, the Arab world. And we have been reading of some rather nasty things that went on in Tahrir Square afterwards in Egypt, men harassing the women who came out for International Women's Day on March 8th were chased away and beaten, etc. And so clearly the women's revolt has not proceeded, shall we say, at breakneck speed. So I would like to hear you, since this is one of your 5 factors, if you could expound on this and your feelings for the extent to which it will, in fact, prevail. Thank you.
That means that I have a paper on that here. It's of course close to my heart, but goes without saying. I have read all of it.
The leading person is an Egyptian woman. She was declared by a court so problematic in her insistence on parity that she was divorced from her husband without knowing it by men. They created an Arab Women's Solidarity Association in 1985. It's a major part of the revolt. And I can only say that I think they are unstoppable, but it will take time. And they were greatly helped by the first president of Tunisia, who was also a dictator, Bourguiba, who day 1 and day 2 declared obligatory elementary school for everybody, girls and boys. And on day 2, parity, women and men. But this has been an enormous light. And somebody has to start. From that on, Tunisia's advances were overshadowed by the negative aspect of the regime that we have heard much about. So, I think I'll not say more at that point. I'll only say I see it as unstoppable. They wanted 1 million to come the 8th of March to Tahrir Square. That did not happen. Doesn't go that quick. Will it happen in Israel? Well, I see from my inner eyes a young Israeli woman, let us say she's about 20 today, and she is suffering the agony. And I could imagine her saying, I believe in a state with Jewish characteristics. But that raises the problem, which Judaism? And it's not a question of choosing. between Orthodox, conservative reform, maybe we could create our own. And if you talk so much about the Muslim Brotherhood, how about the Haredim? The Haredim, 40% of Jerusalem's population, who don't contribute a cent in terms of work and are living off the welfare state, contributing the suppression of women, the way they do it. And there is almost a Rosa Parks thing, you see, the women sitting in the back of the bus in certain regions, parts of the country, parts of Jerusalem, and so on. Now, I expect that revolt to come. And she could then say something like, Judaism is one of our problems. The Judaism we have selected. Another problem is Zionism. Zionism is a geopolitical doctrine. And the doctrine is simply this: create a state where all Jews in the world could live. Now there are 13.9 million. There are currently, let us say, 5 million, or 4.5. So it means 3 times more. That can only go by expansion. If you are tied to that doctrine, you are doomed. Sooner or later you will make the wrong step and you will fall down. And many would say those wrong steps have already been made. Instead, you should do the following. You should appeal to the surrounding Arab countries to accommodate Jewish citizens again, under the doctrine of the Kitab, the book, that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are the 3 religions of the book and could live together. Now, this would require some initiative. And let me then stop, since we are on that, by just saying one thing. I talk very often about this in the Middle East. And I say that I'm now going to compare the Middle East situation to the European Community in 1958. Germany with 5 neighboring states. This would be Israel with 5 neighboring states. And many of you in the audience will think, aha, he's comparing us to Germany. Thank you. And to that I would say, yes, I am. I'm not saying you're Nazis, although some of you are a little bit close. But I am saying that you are difficult to digest for your environment. Now, there were 2 French politicians who said, Nazi Germany has been so atrocious that it has to become a member of the family. And I'm appealing to 2 Arab presidents to say, you have been so atrocious that you have to become a member of the family. So this 20 years Israeli woman, I'm in love with her, of course. I mean, I've never seen her, but I know there are many of her. She will then be receptive to that message. Let me only add with something unpredictable. The person who had the idea of inviting Germany as a member of the family was Jean Monnet, French politician. He wrote a memorandum and he sent it, among others, to his friend Robert Schuman. Robert Schuman never had time to read it. You mean, you're a busy man and you have it in your briefcase. Then happened the following. He was standing at a railway station and the train didn't come, it was on 1 hour delayed. And he said, so let me read that memorandum. It was the beginning of the European Community. So I'm hoping for some delay in some Arab train. And Arab trains are quite often delayed, so that should come true sooner or later. In other words, I'm hoping for that heck of incidents that could move this forward. Thank you.
There's books for sale if anybody's interested in Professor Galtung. Oh, okay, great. We can roll it outside. Who wants this?